Hi, everyone, and welcome to 4DMethod, the 4D user group. Today is March 13th, 2019. On our agenda today, we're going to review a little bit about what 4DMethod is. We're going to get the 4D news from Jim Sobczak in San Jose there. We'll get the Wakanda news, hopefully, from Ricardo Mello. And we will have a discussion about the virtual structure, as I'm calling it, the virtual structure redux, with our own Kirk Brooks, who is visiting us here in Chicago. We'll get the 4D iNug e-digest from Ed Hammond. I'll cover what's going on in the 4D blog recently. And then we'll have our special topic presentation, mdWebSocket, 4D WebSocket component. From Matt Davis. We'll cover some general questions and answers. Feel free to post questions in the YouTube chat window. And then we'll talk about the next meeting on May 8th, 2019. So my name is Brent Raymond. I organize the 4DMethod 4D user group. Our website can be found at 4dmethod.com, and we can be reached at 4dmethod@gmail.com. What we're trying to do here, and what we've been doing for the past few years, is to bring together a scattered community of developers and users of 4D. We stream all of the meetings via YouTube Live, or also known as Hangouts, to allow people to participate from anywhere in the world. All of the meetings are recorded, and the presentations are recorded to be viewed again and shared with others. Or your clients, or anybody that you're discussing, having technical discussions with. And we're attempting to provide fresh new content and exposures for users and developers and your applications and components and contributions to the community from everywhere in the world. Okay, now that that's done, I'd like to welcome Kirk Brooks. Again, as I mentioned, he's our guest host in person here at the Art Institute. Welcome, Kirk.
Thanks, Brent. It's nice to be here.
You're welcome. And we'll have a little bit more of a talk with Kirk in a moment. But first, I'd like to hand it over to Jim in California to talk a little bit about what's going on with 4D.
Thanks, Brent. Hi, everyone. I like this guest host thing. This is pretty awesome. So welcome, Kirk. Donna, unfortunately, is in a meeting with France discussing marketing right now, so she will not be able to attend this meeting, or she may be a little late. But as always, our thanks to Brent and Ed for organizing 4DMethod meetings. And these are just totally awesome, inviting the 4D and Wakanda teams to participate. We certainly appreciate that. And we're looking forward to seeing Matt's presentation on mdWebSockets component today. I recall an interesting discussion on the iNug back in January about this, so we're anxious to see the demo. Here at 4D, we're all busy preparing for World Tour 2019, as you can imagine. For the US, it starts in just a little over 2 weeks in Brent and Ed's town of Chicago on April Fool's Day. So each event, as you may know, is 2 days. We'll be visiting Chicago, Boston, and Atlanta on the eastern swing. Take a couple of weeks off, and then off to Austin, Seattle, and San Jose on the western swing. As usual, Chicago and Boston are forerunners as far as registrations go, so we're looking forward to both of those events too. The first day is free for all, so lots of demos there. We'll do a recap of what's been happening at 4D since the last World Tour in 2017, both in the product line and in our business. So that's the first day. The second day is $4.99 for non-partners and $2.99 for partners. And that's for a full day of state-of-the-art training. Of course, our friend JPR will be working with us once again. He and Ad will be doing the training on day 2. So you won't want to miss that if you can get to one of the cities that we'll be at. So for the first time, we'll be offering discount coupons on one of our professional services that we call deep code analysis. Basically, the 4D professional services team analyzes your code of an application. We give you a detailed report with an action plan for optimizing your application. So we've been doing these with developers for quite a while now, and we're getting really good response on these. So we'll be mentioning that discount, giving codes out at the World Tour event. So we have so much to show this year, with version 17 features being the highlight, Orda, 4D for iOS, and much more. So we really hope to see all of you in a city near you, or if you can't get to a city near you on your road, any place that you can get to would be awesome. So that's it for me, Brent. Thank you for the time, and talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to attending the World Tour trip seminar in Chicago. That's really been a great thing in the past couple times that they've done that. It's you know, for lack of having a summit every year, this is certainly the best thing, almost better, because you don't have to travel and stay a whole week and that kind of thing. So in our case, they're coming right to us, so that's great. Some very valuable training in those sessions. So yep, definitely worthwhile if you can make one of those. Yep, next we'll get the news from Wakanda. We were expecting Ricardo, but perhaps he's been pulled off to something more important. We have one slide that I'll cover.
I'll just interject a comment. So he is also in that big marketing meeting with 4D France. So that it's running late. And if you want to go ahead with the slide, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah. Jim, if you'd like to cover the slide, I'd be happy for you to.
Okay, hold on. I'm getting. Let's see. Sorry. Okay, so this is this is Ricardo's slide, but I'll go over briefly so you can read what's there. What does the end of support? We've been getting some comments about the Wakanda Community Edition. What does the end of support for the Community Edition mean for users? So as most of you know who are Wakanda users, as of February 4th, 2019, we ended the Wakanda Community Developer Community Edition. So you can no longer download that from our website. The users will not be eligible for new releases or support. So that's just the Community Edition. So we still, of course, have the Enterprise Edition available. It's still being supported. We're still you can still download it. There will be new releases of that. That Enterprise Edition is definitely here for the long haul, as it says here in the slide. So old releases of the Wakanda Community Edition are still available on GitHub, but there will be no new updates of that. So, and the Enterprise Edition, as it says there, you can download the free trial on the download page. And if you want to know more about it, or you just want to discuss it, then you can just contact the Wakanda team. Okay, so can you move the slide up a little bit there, Ed? Brent, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I can shrink the window.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Do it there.
There, just the last question I wanted to answer. Yeah, so it's clear there. We no longer supporting the Community Edition. So we know there are a lot of users out there still using the Wakanda Enterprise Edition. I have several of my customers that are using it in conjunction with 4D on 4D mobile sites. So I can confirm that we're definitely supporting that. We're fixing bugs. We're supporting our customers. So yeah, but just the Community Edition is going away.
Okay. There was a question in the chat from Eric Naujok. When is the new Wakanda going to be released? The next version, I suppose he's meaning the it wouldn't be the Community Edition, but
no.
it would be the Enterprise Edition. When is there a release date?
I can check on that. I think he might be talking about version 2.7, but I'll check on a release date. And Eric, I'll get back to you personally on that one. I don't know offhand.
Okay. Well, that's a big development in the world of Wakanda.
Yeah.
But you know, it's I suppose it's a good idea to put all support in the enterprise side of things if that's where all the action is. So so that's the news from Wakanda. Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right. So on to the segment I called the virtual structure redux or redo. I don't know that I'm making up my French here, but I'm sure I'll be scolded for that in April. But right. So a couple years ago, amazing that it's been that long. I actually did a 4D summit segment, a summit session on something we call something we use here at the museum called a virtual structure, and encouraged other people to take a look at the approach and see if it was right for them, and review some of the advantages and disadvantages sometimes of using such an approach. You can see the links to all of the previous summit sessions on the 4D blog at this link that I have posted here, or by searching 2016 Summit. And you can also see yours truly on stage at that YouTube link or on the 4DMethod YouTube channel just by searching for virtual structure. But yeah, so during the presentation, I covered, I took a SWOT per se. I covered the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of the approach of using the virtual structure. And for those of you who have asked, which aren't many, but yes, I did get the idea for that from the Silicon Valley sitcom series, yeah, and which with a hilarious, at least I thought it was pretty funny episode where they did a SWOT of their own analysis and purposes. So yeah, check it out. It's funny. Hopefully, some of you have seen it, and I'm not just talking to everyone who's unfamiliar with that, but. Some of the opportunities that I covered for doing a virtual structure is it works well with access control. So when you need to restrict data on field or record-based per user in your system or your API, it's great. It's ideal for that. It enables easier interface exposure of data stored in object fields, which is very current these days. It's becoming more and more normal for these 4D systems to pack data and data structures and object fields, and to access them with ORDA or query by attribute and that kind of thing. Onward, it encourages generic coding because you register all of the information about the structure in a central sort of registration, and then you use generic methods to access, query, and to retrieve that information. And because there's a separate layer separating your data structure from what you're exposing to the user, there's inherently better data security due to that abstraction. Right, and so past couple weeks, Kirk actually emailed and said, "Hey, I have some of these needs that you reviewed per se with this data security, and I'm starting to use more object fields in my structure, and watched your session, and now with new capabilities in the language, said, hey, maybe there's some better ways to do this." And so I'll hand it over to him to talk a little bit about some of the tips that he's put together in his new approach.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually, excuse me. So I downloaded, so I went and rewatched Brent's presentations and took that and it just immediately moved it into V17 and started playing with it, thinking, because frankly, it was like state-of-the-art V15 programming. And, you know, and it was great for V15, but of course in V17, we've got all these fabulous new tools. And I wanted to see how I could use those tools, because anyone who has read my posts on the NUG recently knows that I'm just really excited about the new direction that these new tools and new capabilities are going in 4D, and I wanted to figure out how to use them. So I started playing with the idea of the virtual structure, and I think we're going to get to some code that you know, has kind of come out of the discussions that Brent and I have been trading back and forth. But preparing for this, I was, pardon me. You know, I was trying to think of the bullet points that I wanted to throw in here for how I would encourage you to start your implementation or exploration of these things. And with pretty much anything V17, I'm finding that it's just really useful if you can start fresh. At the very least, if you're going to write a method, make it a brand new method. Even if you bring in elements from your old method, start with a new one. Start with a new module, start with a new database if you can. I'm actually rewriting a lot of the elements that go into my, you know, my fundamental database. Secondly, think about the virtual structure is essentially a schema. And I think we've all been working with schemas for a long time now. 4D is also for quite a long time, I don't know how long, had the ability to go in and establish a virtual structure by renaming and controlling access to fields and tables. So these aren't new concepts at all. But what we're doing, you know, what Brent's first work did and what we're kind of talking about doing here is to integrate that with the new capabilities that come about through collections, through objects, through the new form capabilities, and to make those both controllable in terms of, you know, sometimes a database will have these special needs where you really want to be able to control, like down to the level of a field, which user can see it, which user can edit it, etc. And a virtual structure at that point just becomes really, really handy. Also, the thing to keep in mind is the virtual structure is primarily about the UI and the presentation of the data. It's about streamlining the user's interaction, but it's not going to fix structural problems. So if you've got a database that is an old database with an old structure, and frankly, it's kind of a mess, a virtual structure is not necessarily going to make that any better. Now, you can certainly clean up the presentation that you're going to be showing to the customer, but it isn't going to help you on the back end. So don't go into it thinking that's where you're going to fix those problems. And then, you know, as I touched on before, it easily starts to extend to the other, to the new tools that we've got available, which is like form, dynamic form objects, and dynamic forms. And, you know, with a virtual, you can of course use any of those things with just native 4D V17 and on, but combined with a virtual structure, there's some really exciting capabilities there, I think, as far as really polishing your application and the presentation to the customer, as well as being able to design in a very high level of configurability to the customer without you losing control of it. So, you want to move on?
Yep. No, I agree with all those points, and I mean, there's so much advantage these days to using objects heavily in the language, and it's native. It simplifies so much of the complex data that we're tasked with organizing and with handling from other sources as well. But users don't always want to have to fish through, oh, okay, well, I know that it's this dot that, this dot this, and nobody wants dots. Everybody just wants a basic field that either shows up or doesn't show up depending on you know, what your job is and what security level you're at. Are you at DEF CON 3? Well, you get to see everything.
Right. And and then another thing, and this has come up in some other discussions that I've had with other developers about this gives us the opportunity also to really flatten out complex objects that, like with the entity object now, you can get an extremely complex object, which gives you a lot of data, and it's very handy from a programming standpoint. But this is not something that's going to be friendly to the user on one hand. And on the other hand, when you do come to using form, it's just a lot easier if you can keep that form object relatively flat. Something nested 4 or 5 levels down on a form, sure, you can put a dynamic object on there that's going to reference that, but that becomes pretty fragile. Whereas when we start dealing with object names that are closer to the root level, if you will, they're just easier to manage.
Yeah, Eric mentioned, I find it would be really handy to be able to view the data store record in the system, kind of like allowing browsing of the tables. And what we're talking about doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
However, it provides more fine control of who that gets exposed to. So perhaps you, as an administrator or as a developer, have certain flags set in the virtual structure, or certain fields which represent the deeper nested data structure of the objects and the relationships. Whereas your customers aren't imposed, don't have that imposed on them. Where if they're just trying to print a report or do a query, they're not having to have a native knowledge of these complex data structures.
Exactly. Because I think that's part of our job as a developer, actually, is to abstract the data into the structure that it needs to be represented correctly and maintained correctly and queried. And frankly, that's what most of us spend an awful lot of our time doing. But that doesn't really make a friendly interface. And that's where the users are actually going to interface with it. And, and I can tell you from bitter experience that I'm sure is shared by others, that a whole lot of heartache and headache comes from users simply entering stuff incorrectly. And frequently, what I see is that incorrect data goes in because it's just not clear what they're supposed to be entering. So so again, the flatter, the easier I can make it to understand what it is that you're filling in the form with, the better the data is going to be down the line when we're actually trying to use it.
Right. Yeah. That brings up a very good point. It's the usual. It's like the Spider-Man theme of just because you can doesn't mean you should expose these complex objects and expect people to structure their data according to your expectations in the code. That's correct. Eric said garbage in, garbage out. That's
exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And so this just provides a much stricter control over the garbage in general.
So for those of you following along at home, I would encourage you to, take a look at Brent's 2 presentations, both the one from the summit and the one that he did here at 4DMethod, because they're not the same. And, they're slightly different, and you get a little bit different view and stuff on either one. And just to give you a concept of what we're talking about, because the slides we're going to look at are extracts from emails Brent and I have been trading back and forth, and just examples. So we've kind of just been rolling with this thing. And the idea of the virtual structure is that you create a series of records, or you create a JSON, you create a definition of. You can create a virtual field. You can create a virtual table. Just to use, since we're here at the Art Institute, to use art objects as an example, because they're a good one. An art object is probably going to have a whole lot of actual data tables that combine records from there to adequately represent what that one object is. Not to mention, in the context of being here, you know, an object could be a book, a print, a painting, a giant sculpture that requires a semi and a crane to move, down to, you know, tiny little artifacts. All of these things are first-class objects, but they all have radically different characteristics. They all have radically different needs and descriptions and things that people are going to want to and need to catalog about that. Clearly, we can do that in the database, but it helps the user quite a lot when we can abstract those things down in a way that just cleans it up. So we remove a lot of the chatter and let them look at what they want. And that's what Brent, you know, offers in his presentations. Looking at how we can do that in 4D now, and actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, and you know, just one of the aspects that I covered in the presentation is that the virtual structure itself is just a concept, and it doesn't certainly I wouldn't dictate any way is better of doing such an approach or a strategy is better than the other. It's mostly left up to your requirements, to your needs, what, you know, the type of data that you're handling, the type of users that you have. We've got pretty picky and loud users here at the museum that want to see only what they want to see, and have no one else see that. So Kirk and I had a bit of an exchange to talk about a couple of different approaches. And the first one, I guess I'll kick over to the code, is using JSON resolve pointers. And
what I think is cool about this, you know, so I was looking at how to move from using, you know, physical pointers to fields and variables that, you know, we're used to working with on forms, to using, you know, the form variable and dynamic objects that refer directly to that. Because I am completely sold on that. I tell you, it is so much easier to design forms and quickly and robustly using that approach. So the issue then came up about, okay, if I define a virtual structure and I'm referring to field, you know, how am I going to refer to fields within the database in a way that then makes it easy for me to turn them into something that I can put in the form object and then I can relate on the on the screen. And the things that I found really helpful there's the entity to object command. So, you know, once you using Orda obtain an entity object, which can be, like I say, a very complex object, you can use entity to object to then flatten, if you will, that object into a more concise object based on a definition that you may have defined within your virtual structure. And so this first little block of code here that starts with the $VS object, new object, this was just a proof of concept of how you would go about doing that. And so what this does is create a new object, and then the field 1, field 2, field 3 are, you know, arbitrary names of a virtual structure field. And I'm building this object with the intent of using resolve pointer to get the actual data. And so to do that, and you know, I'll leave it to you to go read up on resolve pointers. This is really cool.
Yeah, when I saw his example, you know, I responded with, what is this black magic? We will put up a sample database after this meeting with some of this code for you to explore on your own time.
Yeah, you know, when I suggested we have this discussion, I'm really hoping to just kind of encourage, you know, encourage anybody who's watching to, like, go start playing with this stuff, because you know, you'll figure it out. But so this first block is just creating the objects necessary for resolve pointer, and what I'm doing is just, you know, adding some things in from an example that I made up. You can then attach that VS rec object to the data object, resolve the pointers, and then this VS rec object is the representation of your virtual structure. And I just kind of stumbled on that at night and thought, wow, this works. Emailed it to Brent, and he looked at it a couple days later, and then we've been talking about it ever since. But yeah, we need to. I'll make something a little more cogent, and we'll get that up in a day or two.
Yeah, but this is again, these two examples cover the data retrieval aspect of the virtual structure, where you're defining each of the fields as this is the path to the object with the collection, and I want a certain collection item number. Digging down into your data structure, even navigating through relationships, all within just this text representation of the pathing, almost like an XPath, but for JSON references. And it has certain advantages, obviously, that this being just text, this could be stored externally, stored in some kind of a preference, where you just slurp it up and apply it to whatever. You can have different ones for different clients, and it's quick and easy given the JSON resolve pointers approach.
Yep, and it generalizes to everything. This is, you can build an editor that could allow users to design their own, and then of course this like I say would just lead right into being used with dynamic forms for you to be able to create a form on the fly for a definition that a user developed based on the rules that you made available to them. So
yeah, and so I said, well, I want to play too. I can do black magic too, damn it. But no, I've been, given that this is a very pertinent to our application here at the museum, I've long had my eye on some of the new features. Namely, I mentioned I was mystified by the formulas, new formula, the ways that you can use these formulas that has come out recently, and I believe it's 17R3. And clearly is having more development exposed in our versions here. But so the same values can be created, can be mapped using formulas for each of your field definitions. So you can have an object which represents the field definitions for a table. You can have a formula which says it can just be a static value, which is pulling from the data store or from the data object. You can, that's what each of these are doing. So you can see, it's taking the data, going to deeper, and then pulling out that particular value. But then one of the advantages of this approach, even though it's locked up in your code base for the most part, is you can have more complex formulas, such as, in this case, very simple, but running an uppercase on the last name, multiplying values, doing string manipulation, and onward to, you can really pack a whole ton of logic into query strings and order statements with member functions, chains of member functions, which would, traditionally have been large blocks of 4D code, can be represented by these formulas, which can be registered in your virtual structure, and have a generic approach where, okay, for this particular record object, apply this virtual structure. Get me this field value from my data. So yeah, so there's more than one way to handle, to approach this kind of theory and strategy. And I think it seems like with the language changes that are happening so often now, there's a lot more than that we're not even thinking about. If you have some other ideas yourself, I'd love to hear them. And we'll put together some of this code so you can play with it on your own time without having to type it all in, and share that with you in the coming days.
Yep, it's exciting stuff. Yeah, I mean, a better definition or a better example, I think, will make it, will certainly be good. But seriously, just try it yourself. Once you start working with this stuff, it falls together so nicely and so easily. So I just want to encourage you to explore a little bit.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Kurt. On to the iNug eDigest with our own Ed Hammond.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you can hear me. If you can't, put something up on chat, because we've got some technical challenges we're dealing with today. As always, I encourage you to avail yourselves of all of the technical information that's available on the internet, the iNug being one. Also check out the 4D forums, the forums in France. You get a lot of access to the 4D staff through the forums. They seem to be monitoring those very closely. And with that, I will start right in. Steve Orth had a question about socket communication. And I'm just filing this under what a remarkable coincidence. And I'll leave Matt Davis to cover his answers that he had for Steve, and the presentation will speak for itself. There seems to be a lot of back and forth going on as people prepare for 64-bit implementation or the end of 32-bit, especially with 4D Write and 4D Write Pro. Armin Deeg, at least I think that's how it's pronounced, had a message on the iNug about 9 missing features and open bugs, and he needs your support. So if you need those features in your 4D Write implementations before you move to 4D Write Pro, please register those on the forums and vote for those features. Again, all of these links are up on the 4DMethod website on the eDigest page. Continuing with our 64-bit versus 32, a question by Peter Chabot Stadholders. Does 4D 64-bit volume desktop use more than one core? Lots of people have set him straight on that issue, on how to use multiple cores, preemptive processing and thread safety, plugin and component things you have to watch out for. And in his case, he's using 4D for OCI and Citrix. So that thread pretty much covers the kitchen sink. Peter Hay had a question on how to get a window reference for the MDI window in 4D 64-bit Windows. He was using Win32 API, but apparently in 64-bit, that's got some issues. Miyako came to the rescue with a couple of options, and that covers differences you'll find in 32-bit versus 64-bit on Windows. Jim Crate had a question on how to display read-only input forms. Many people gave him options for doing so, for covering displaying data without allowing entry. Our own Kirk Brooks had a question on set time question, but I believe it was a set timer question. Yeah, more of a set timer question and how to update a window without interrupting user input. If you are using set timer for those type of things, check that out. I had a question about relation naming for ORTA in V17 and what are best practices. Had a lot of suggestions from a lot of people. If you deal with a legacy structure that has all kinds of relations, you'll find that 4D has named them very carefully for you with some arcane names. So as you start using ORTA, you may want to rename some of those relations. I liked using the suffix underscore MO and underscore OM to identify which ones were many to one and one to many. That seemed to be a pretty clear designation. And since you can name these anything, I'm sure you'll come up with one solution that you like yourself. Klaus Droer had a posting on document management solutions for 4D, which was pretty timely considering our last demonstration using document management. Kirk Brooks, again, volunteered some nice code, which he gave a link to in GitHub on easy dynamic field highlighting. If that's of interest to you, check out his example on GitHub. Pat Bensky had a question on can't run as a service on Windows 2016. And in my mind, this highlighted the importance of knowing your host operating system and the challenges we have as developers in monitoring changes between different versions of host OSs. Currently here at the museum, we've got people on Sierra, High Sierra, and Mojave, Windows 7 64-bit Pro, and Windows 10 64-bit Pro. So a lot of times we'll have an issue and it'll pop up on the client and we have to go, well, what are they running? Or better yet, I didn't know we had Windows 10 in the wild already. And now we know. Good thing we keep track of that kind of stuff. So if you're dealing with DevOps operations, check out that thread, especially if you're running Windows servers on 2016. John Foster ran into some debugger window corruption. Again, the importance of knowing your development environment, and I'll forgive John because I think he's been away for a while and has come back. But apparently if you hold the shift key down and hit the run triangle on your method, it'll automatically bring up a resized debugger window. Who knew? Well, obviously Doug Von Roeder knew. So if you're looking for those kind of tips, the iNug is the place for you. And Tim Nevels developed a Dropbox upload and download method and provided detailed API code. So if you're moving away from FTP and using Dropbox to distribute stuff, please check out his API examples. So avail yourself of all the information that's out there in the iNug and the forums. Right now on the forums, the chatter seems to be pretty much 4D Write versus 4D Pro and what's missing, and trying to push that up so everybody can move to 64-bit. And we'll start covering a little bit more of the forums maybe next month. So there have been some interesting posts by one Ed Hammond up there. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Brent.
Thanks, Ed. Yes, I can verify that there is some very interesting content in the forums, and I definitely appreciate Ed's covering of all this content on the NUG, and potentially more from the forum. If there's anybody else who's a real 4D forums junkie and would like to cover some of those topics, that would be awesome too. Reach out to us and we can make that happen. But yeah, on to some more discussion about what's been going on with 4D Write Pro and View Pro and 4D for iOS in our segment called What the Block. So it's been just a torrent of action for these different modules of 4D. For 4D Write Pro, new features such as it now supports virtual structures, not the kind we were talking about earlier, but similar. Get coordinates, vertical rulers in 4D View Pro. You can create ranges and formulas, and you can name them. You can get and set cell content, code a range, create a range in code. For 4D for iOS, you can create restricted queries, custom data formatters, multi-criteria search in 4D for iOS. I think this is awesome. However, I have a hard time keeping up with it. And if there is so much interest, which I can see that there is out there on the NUG and in the discussions at the forum, with these products, certainly 4D Write Pro is a big one. Again, I would love to hear more from the community if anybody would like to cover how they're using 4D Write Pro and taking advantages of some of the new capabilities of 4D Write Pro. I invite you to reach out and perhaps cover a little segment for the user group about these new capabilities. That way we can go take a deeper dive into some of the new developments in Write Pro and View Pro and 4D for iOS. Otherwise, in the core language, we have a couple of blog posts and new developments with 17R4 that I wanted to highlight. One being easily synchronize your processes, which covers a new command, I suppose, or strategy, however you want to call it. But its name is new signal, and it creates a signal object, which you can then pass to, say, a worker, and then you can wait for a response from the signal, because you can't interact with a worker very easily using, say, inter-process variables like you might have done between processes in more traditional 4D. You can't use those in workers, but inside of the worker, you can, or inside of other, wherever you've passed the signal to, you can use the signal. You can set a result within the signal, and then you can trigger it to pass it back to the other waiting process. This is just something which is going to be interesting, how other people how people use it, and how we're going to be able to use that new capability. It's a whole new way to call get process variable per se, something like that, but in processes where you're not allowed to get process variable anymore. In fact, you're going to be able to pass back and forth very complex objects and use them in a multitude of ways. And a really welcome new set of commands and code for sending mails. For years, going back to many years ago in 4D, 4D was always provided extremely simple, good ways of sending some types of mail. However, for all the exceptions, you often had to really bend over backwards, and if you do a quick search on 4D Summit sessions and the knowledge base and the NUG and the forum, you'll find just a whole ton of, and perhaps even Miyako's GitHub, one of my favorite hangouts. Just a whole bunch of different ways to have different levels of control for sending email from within 4D. And all of that seems to be collected here and represented in the new commands. And not only that, it's all organized in a very neat way. You create this new SMTP transporter object. you create your mail object, you feed your mail object to the transporter object, and then you get a result, and the result being also a result object. So it's a really nice and welcome addition, and I almost regret having completely reprogrammed all of my email code last year, and then having seen this. But hey, now I get all of the shortcomings that that they are taking care of now with these new capabilities. So definitely worth checking out. Also very cool, now 4D Remote can have preemptive processes, rules being everything that was valid for in the language for on the server for preemptive processes. They're now valid in 4D Remote. This unleashes just a terrific amount of power if you say want to spin up a bunch of worker machines and a sort of Hadoopian, for those of you that are familiar with Hadoop, sort of an approach for processing large amounts of data, big data per se. Now you can push out multiple jobs and process them on multiple processors to any number of 4D remote machines, 4D remote applications, and do a lot of stuff. So good developments in 4D. Really good stuff. So now, sorry for the added delay. I know we've all been looking forward to this demo. We have Matt Davis joining us from Washington State, near Seattle, or perhaps in Seattle. You may have seen him active on the iNug under the name Spiffy Guy. I appreciate his colorful naming there. And if you recognize the name Davis, well, his dad has been a part of the 4D community and 4D developers community since 4D was called Silver Surfer. Scott Davis. And hi, Scott Davis, if you're watching. And thank you for introducing your son to 4D back in the day. Matt grew up with 4D, dabbling on a few small projects throughout the years, and he really started getting into it a lot deeper about 5 years ago. He currently runs the IT department for Bedrooms and More, a furniture company. Beyond 4D, he's made a few iOS and Android apps for the bedroom store, and has done personal projects including inventory, point of sale, phone calls, messaging, Genealogy. He's even created a few 4D plugins in C to make PDFs and XLSX documents. Beyond that, he created his own 4D plugin wizard to help generating his own plugins, which is already more than most people in the 4D community would dream of. And as well as creating 4D components of his own, one of which he's going to share with us here today. He's starting to branch out on his own and write tools and help to share some of his progress and technology that he's put together. And he'll be sharing a very useful component today for working with WebSockets. So welcome to 4DMethod, Matt.
All right, thanks, Brent. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I just want to say that, you know, as Brent said, this is, in the last few months, I've been trying to branch out. Some of the stuff that I've been creating has been, you know, useful for me. I mean, I've had to create it for specific use cases, and then realizing, whoa, this isn't out there, and I'd like to share it with a few people. As Ed mentioned on the iNug, you know, Steve Orth mentioned he was interested in socket communication, and has anybody done that? And so I posted on there, and then I reached out to him separately to kind of show him, you know, what I had created and what I'm what I needed, to do and solve, and it actually sounded pretty right on par with what he needs. And so I reached out to Brent and wanted to share this component. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started then. So let's see if we can go on. We'll share my screen, and then I'm gonna open up the presentation. So to start, just a little bit about me. Yes, my name is Matt Davis, second generation. Scott Davis, as you heard, is my dad. And I've been working with 4D for a long time. I kind of call myself the 4D Matt Davis, or the 4D MD for short. I've been programming specifically in 4D for a while now. As Brent said, more, I guess, full time in the last 5 years, but dabbled in my whole life, and then have been programming it for about 12 years for various things. And I just love looking at, I guess, the different companies, different problems that they have, and trying to figure out how to connect different things. I love looking at what you're interested in. So if you use iOS, great. I'll try to write something for that. If you use Android, I'll write something for that. If I have, for a number of clients, just varying devices, tons of different devices that I've been able to interface and have 4D be the server and the back end for handling. So before I get right into showing, because I want to show a few demos to start this thing, I just want to talk about what WebSockets are and why. Essentially, when you're visiting a website, it downloads all the resources for that website and then disconnects. So you're now looking at a local offline copy of a website. So it can kind of, those are the AJAX calls, or just the get and post calls that just go and come back and then they're gone. With WebSockets, you actually have the ability to keep that connection open, and bi-directional communication. So I can send stuff to the server can send stuff to me. It is an open connection. The data itself is called frames. When you run a get or run a post, just like email, just like pretty much how the web works, is there's always a header packet kind of describing what you're wanting, what cookies you're offering with it, either file uploads, things like that, and then as well as the payload data, like the variables of a form. But with a WebSocket, once it's negotiated and open, it is just the data you're sending back and forth. You do not need to renegotiate the requests and re-authenticate the user every single request. It is already done, and now you have a secure connection that can just talk back and forth. From the 4D side, or I should say really any server side, but 4D side is what I wrote this for. You can know exactly who is looking at your web application right now. That could be beneficial for a number of, I think, more employee-facing applications. Not so much you'd put it, like if we were writing CNN, we probably wouldn't want to have 1 million connections for everybody that's reading CNN right now. It would be, more like behind a login, and then knowing that that person is live and looking at the application. The component that I wrote is in the similar vein of register client, and then being able to execute on a client. So you can, from the server, sort of push information to the 4D client. It works in a very similar way to a web client instead. Okay, so we're going to go to the first demo. I've got a few things that I just wanted to show, kind of basics of just how it communicates and then how you interact with it. There's a link right here, and I think Brent also put the link on the blog if you're just at his website at the 4dmethod.com, looking at that first post. And if you want, you can head there now. I'm going to get out of full screen here and then actually kind of pull up the chat window.
Yep, the slides, the link to the slides, and the demo databases are all on the post for this method.
Great, thank you, Brent. So this is a very simple, this kind of example doesn't have necessarily a login. Once you access this website, it actually in JavaScript already opens up the WebSocket to a 4D server I have running on this machine. And then just gives you kind of a simple interface to say, hey, type in your name to rename, who you are, and then, and then you're part of the chat. So I can say, hi, everybody, and then it sends to the WebSocket. So I want to kind of show what this is. So, for example, this is just meant to be a simple way of just showing data going to and from. So I'm going to inspect this website to kind of see how, right now this is Safari, but this works in Chrome and IE and Edge and everything as well. But on Safari, I'm going to head to the resources tab of the web developer thing here, so you can see what resources for this page. And notice how I've got my I've got my page, I've got my JavaScript, which is not much, just a small little bit there, a little bit on the styles just for styling. And then you can see this resource right here called chat that actually has a green dot next to it. And what that's telling you is that it is a WebSocket and it is open. It is negotiated, and now you have a connection to the 4D server that's running here, and then back and forth. So as you can see here, there's a few things happening. There's a part of the WebSocket specification is to have a ping and pong to kind of check the, I guess, you want to make sure it's still alive, but also kind of the speed of the WebSocket, so you can know that it's still valid. And what you're looking at as these things are popping up is people are changing their name, and the server is actually pushing the information. It's saying the server says, WebSocket 11 has changed to Brento, WebSocket 8 has changed to Nikki, and then it's refreshing my screen on the web page. So I haven't asked for anything. Everything you're seeing right now is a push coming from the 4D server. So just to show an example of sending data to the 4D server, I can type in my message. So I can say, "Hi, everyone, how is it going?" And I'll hit send. And if you look at the screen here, and I wish I could grow the font size on the Safari window, I apologize. But you can see a green row, and essentially the green row has an arrow showing that's what went up to the server. And then the ones that are not green, Safari is showing what came back from the server. So I sent, message, "Hi everyone, how's it going?" You can see there's not even a user or anything because the server already knows who I am. And then the server then sent to it looks like 7 people that are connected right now, the same message, just synced all together. As far as who sent it, you can see the sender there, it's a JSON object, Matt Davis, and what the message was and what time that message was received and sent. Oh, great, thank you. So this right here is the website or the internet side of it, and then I want to show you on the 4D side how this works or how this kind of connected. Notice, remember, I didn't run any GET calls or any POST calls. I could, but everything is going through that one channel communication, that one negotiation that just stays open for back and forth. And you can watch as this is going on. You can see, Danny left the chat. As people close their browser, it instantly lets the server know, and then lets us know that they left or that they came in. So I've got it open right here. I'm actually just running it in just 4D standalone mode, but I can, it runs in 4D server, it runs in all those, but just for the sake of being able to show you the code as well as what it is here. So there's not much to this database. I wrote this as a specific demo of this chat. The mdWebSocket component is inside this demo, so I'm going to kind of open it up right here to just kind of see some of the method names that are in here. But essentially, all that happens is I start the server, and then I listen to sort of these 4 hooks right here. I listen to these project methods, or I guess I hook into these methods so that you can manipulate how you're going to use the WebSocket. And then when we quit the database or whenever I want to, we can shut down the server. So I'll just show you real quick in the database methods. I just have an on startup. I'm going to just open this up that just says, as long as you're not the 4D client, because I wanted this to, I can open it up in 4D server, or just open this as 4D standalone. But as long as you're not a client, I go ahead and just start the server. So the WebSocket server itself runs on a different port than the 4D internet, server. That one you would normally probably have on port 80 or 443 for SSL. But this right here, you can see I'm running the chat on port 8091, and that's configurable. You can set whatever port you'd like it to run as, so that it's listening for WebSocket connections. And if anybody has any questions or anything, just let me know. And if I actually would like this to be a little bit more collaborative than just a presentation. But if I'm going too fast, or if I'm not explaining something, please jump in.
No, it's been great so far.
Great. So the first hook that would be up to you, the developer, to implement is this method called mdWebSocket allow connection. So this is where when a WebSocket gets negotiated, this is where you can set up whatever logic you'd like to either allow them or deny, decline them. It is it returns a simple Boolean just at the bottom. The $0 right there, simple Boolean to kind of say that yes, I accept this, or no, I don't. I use something like this for, I have certain apps that I've written for a time clock that I only want to run on certain machines. So in the connection details is an object full of the IP they connected, full of header information, and full of just everything you need. Everything you need to, I guess, determine that you want them to connect to your database. So if I were to just get rid of this $0 true, then anybody that's refreshing the website would not gain access. It would not connect. They would not see who's in, none of that kind of stuff. And so right now, the criteria is just you went to the chat. Most likely, what you would do right here is check maybe a session variable, a cookie from the browser where they've logged in, just to verify against it, and then say, okay, I know who you are. Yes, we're good. And then I saw a question right here. It says the communication is unencrypted, I assume. Actually, that depends on a few things. Oh, I see somebody wrote Spiffy Guy for the for their name. Awesome. But that depends. So, for example, on what I'm running right now for the demo, exactly right here, I actually have this running through a reverse proxy, kind of outside the scope of what this demonstration is, but a reverse proxy, for those that don't know, is just a web server that just kind of acts as kind of a man in the middle for a web server on the inside. So in this example, 4D server, where I can add SSL and make it encrypted. So for the example of what we're doing right now, it is encrypted. It's not, if you were to inspect the element and look at the frames again, right? And you can see like all the data's here. You're seeing it because I have, I've sent the data to you. So it's kind of meant, but the communication between is, in this example, encrypted. On the right side here, I'm not sure how well you can read it because again, the font size is small here in the Safari developer window. But to connect to a WebSocket, I use the WSS, which is just a secure WebSocket to connect to this demo, and then and that's what kind of handles the encryption for the communication. So that's the first hook to just kind of get them in, and then once they're in, these other ones I think make sense where there's an on connect, there's an on data or message, but on data, and then on disconnect. So essentially on connect, so when somebody enters, the website or this particular, chat. All I'm doing is I'm saying who entered, who came in. The component already passed in into this hook method, who it was, and then I strip out the prefix because well, we can talk about that a little bit later. But I kind of wrote it in a way that I could scope depending on how they got to me, what page they got to me on. That I could say, hey, this is related to an employee portal, or hey, this is related to a chat, this is related to a to-do list, so that I could kind of only send messages relevant to that particular group. So for right here, you can see here that I just strip out that beginning, so I can just get what the name is, and then I run this method that I'm going to open up right here that essentially creates an object. I go ahead and write that it's the server that's sending. And then what the message is, which I passed it in. I said, whoever joined the chat. So you can see there, mdWebSocket 13 joined the chat. And then if I pass that into this method that true for the send user list, then it will also get the list of who's connected to the WebSocket right now, and add that to the object. And then this right here is an example, or is the method to send data to the browser from 4D. There's a couple of methods like send text, send object. I mean, this is essentially sending an object for this JSON stringify here. In future versions, they'll be sending a image, sending a binary data, because a WebSocket itself has no specification for what goes inside of it. It's just meant to be a connection, and that's what the specification is for. And then it's up to you on how you'd like to communicate. It makes the most sense. I mean, kind of like what Brent was talking about earlier, just how powerful objects are and how, I guess, easily you can organize the data. That in every iteration of the using WebSockets, I use JSON objects. It just makes too much sense to not do it, right? And so what you're looking at right here is for the mdWebSocket send text, it takes two parameters. The first parameter is who you're sending it to. And then the second parameter is the payload or the frame or the data that you're sending to. And if you're reading this, the @ symbol is a wild character. So I'm really saying anybody who's logged into the chat now is going to get this message. So this is the one that you saw a couple of times. I'm going to open up the frame again a few times. Let's go to resources and click on the chat again. Oh, it looks like I've refreshed, so I'll have to open up a new one. What I can do here is I'll just open up another window. I'll just be, number 2. And now you can see on the second example, so for those that aren't in the chat right there, I actually now have 2 connections to the server through 2 separate browsers. And what I type in over here, I get sent to the server, and then, like I said, instantly kind of comes back to whoever's connected. So you can keep things in sync. And if we were to look at that frame again, let's come over here to the frame. And then, so that one we were looking at, that method we were looking at that said send message to all from the server. And we were talking about that the sender was the server and what the message was that somebody joined and the timestamp. It's right here. So you can see, and I wish, again, if I could grow the text right there, I would. But you can see that's the relationship of from 4D being able to send a frame back to the browser. What's really cool about these connections and how they work is both the browser and 4D in this example, they know exactly when a connection gets disconnected, exactly when someone enters, when someone leaves, that kind of thing. It is because it is essentially just like a regular old socket. I mean, WebSocket is essentially, it is a socket just with the word web in front of it, and the fact that you can use it in regular browsers. That's kind of the whole point of WebSockets. But so as soon as I leave, so I'm going to close the second browser over here. It's going to disconnect the WebSocket. 4D is going to hit our hook for the on disconnect, and then we're going to send an update to everybody. So as soon as I close this, you can see on my other one over here, it instantly already let us know that Matt Davis number 2 has left the chat. And what you're looking at there is the browser telling the server, hey, I'm gone, and then leaves. I mean, the browser's gone. And then the server has right then, as soon as I see it here, everybody saw it at the same time. If I know it got here, that was pushed from the server and it went to everybody in this list on the right side here. So this example right here, and I'm going to have this just, if anybody's curious, later on, right after this presentation, I'm going to put these up on my website so that you can download these and play with them and see for yourself kind of how it works back and forth. One of the methods here, I'm going to open up my method editor, and I've got just a testing method. I want to show you this. So here I'm on the server. I mean, I know it's 4D standalone, but bear with me here. I'm on the server, and I'd like to send a message to everybody, without them asking, just and I'm gonna, in this example, I just made a for loop with 100 iterations, and I'm gonna send a message to everybody. So I'm just gonna hit play, and then it just sent. If you were to, if you're watching this, you can see it scrolls down. Is all 100 were sent to the browser, and everybody got that. Maybe I should ask Ed, did you get the 100 messages?
Yep, I think he did.
Awesome. And
it was amazingly fast too. That's
right.
That's really terrific.
Well, the reasons for this, I've written, you touched on a few of them there, Brent, as far as stuff I've created or stuff that I've done. The reason for this is it's a tool, and it's for real-time communication. The idea is to know right now that somebody's gone, or right now somebody requested something right now. And, we live in a world of, the internet is all around, and, you request a website, it may take a second, it may take 2 seconds, right? But if it takes 3, I mean, it's a slow website. It's awful, and it's crazy to me that we think like that. But it's just, everybody thinks so fast that when I want it, I want to get it. And WebSockets allow for that, at least perception of hey, I asked for this, and it's an instant update. So so if I were to look right here, so I can just to prove that this wasn't a pre kind of thing here. I'll say sending another, test message, and then we'll do that. And maybe we'll just add kind of a few characters just to kind of say that it is something different. And then as soon as I hit play, then it sends through. And like I said, as soon as I see it here, everybody else saw it too. And if we were to look at this, so let's go look at the frame here. So I'm going to go back. I should have just opened it right here. You can see these right here are all the frames. Remember, the payloads or the data that's coming from 4D. And they all came in just like, and I guess the other thing that I want to reiterate is that you're looking at individual frames. So it wasn't that I made a long string that happened to have 100, I'm looping 100 times and making one big string and sending it. I actually communicated back down to every one of these clients 100 times, like in a split second, separately.
Now,
and so, go ahead.
For a practical matter, with the plugin, if you have 5 people connected to a socket for licenses, will it use 5 licenses, or is it just 1 license per installation, server installation?
Yep, it's going to be 1 license per server installation. I'll talk more about this just a little bit later, but I will say that so the mdWebSocket, so MD, my name is Matt Davis, so you can kind of get where the MD comes from, is going to be, after this presentation, available to download and play with, and it'll be kind of an open beta. It'll be limited to 3 connections for your testing, so you can get multiple devices, and have them connect, and then there'll be a license fee per server installation that'll be at a later date. But I wanted to reach out and show this off, and then also get it into people's hands so they can play with it and actually ask questions like that, Brent, like different things like, wow, we can use this for this, and give me ideas as well that I can change some of the development as well. But as an example of the on connect or disconnect is kind of just knowing if somebody's logged into your web application, right? They clock in at 8, maybe they clocked in with a different device or different tool, but they never opened up your web application that kind of has important information for them. You can tell from the server, hey, they're not in, so you can either, I guess, reach out to them a separate way, or as soon as they get in, then you can say, hey, I know you're here, I can just send you a message, or say, okay, good, it's handled, or he's there. That's just one example.
Now, I see you have some version 15 4D there. Is this 4D? What 4D versions are you expecting the component will be able to run with?
So actually, so starting with V15 is what the beginning is. Mainly because I love objects and I wanted to kind of keep it with that. I actually could have gone back a lot further. I wrote just some very low-level code reading the WebSocket specification to just make it work. And but I just think objects are the way to organize your data. And so V15 and up. Right now, it's in about 5 databases in production. I use it for a number of things in bedrooms and more, but we use it in V15. And then we have a few installations in V17 that my dad uses, and then one of my dad's coworkers has another project that he uses it on. And so I've tested it on V15, V16, and V17, but right now in production with V17 and V15.
Awesome. And it's not OS dependent like Mac or Windows or anything.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Mac, Windows, both of them will work, and 32-bit and 64-bit. I've made sure that it works for both, kind of any environment, which is great.
Awesome.
And what's really cool. So part of the reasoning for all that is WebSockets are something that are supported by I mean almost every device nowadays. It's like IE 10 up. And if I say IE, you know, anybody who worked with the web is like, oh man, you know, that old thing. But it's and you know what I love to use it for, or at least what I created the need for, is we have multiple devices throughout like our showroom that need kind of constant communication. We have a few like Wayfinder kiosks that are not, they're Linux, and they go to a full screen browser, and so they can't run 4D client. But I'm able to open this connection and then talk back and forth, and so it kind of solves that need that we needed. So this right here is a demo of showing how communication works, like how things go back and forth through the frames, and then how the 4D server can respond, I guess allow, respond, and then be made aware of when they disconnect. On connect and disconnect are almost identical in the code. It's essentially someone left, and so I'm just going to send a message to everybody saying they left. So it's very simple in the other ones. And then as far as the frames go for on data, so I'll show you this real quick here. So this is the hook that when you send data from the chat, when you send data from the chat to the 4D server, it comes here first. So from here, you would springboard to multiple methods, you know, that you've got organized. Right now, for the sake of this demo, I just did a case of statement right in here. And if you were to look, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page so I can kind of show just what it does right at the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. And then, so I just joined, and we've got a message saying that WebSocket 22 joined, and then it's asking what your name is. So I'm going to write Matt Davis, hit enter. And then right here, you can see here, I sent a JSON in JavaScript. I sent action register name Matt Davis. So that was what I sent to the server. And then in here, I've got a case of statement showing the, you know, if the action is register and you sent me a name because I don't want a blank name, then I'm going to change my registered name as a WebSocket. And then I'm just going to let everybody else know. The alert name change is very similar to the send message from, you know, from the server. It's just kind of a little sub method to just let everybody know that, you know, mdWebSocket 22 is changed to Matt Davis. And then that's how they respond. I mean, with a GET or a POST request, you know, you have kind of a, hey, give me data, and then you wait for the server to respond, and then it comes back, and then it's over. But this way of having the connection open is you sort of listen to events, or listen to, you know, I call them actions or events. I mean, either kind of stuff there. You listen for things, and then you react to things, and then just based on timing, that's how it looks like I said, hey, my new name, here's a AJAX request. Here's my new name is Matt Davis. And then you gave me back the you know, let everybody know that it's going on, or you know, that it's been changed. But with frames, there's no such thing as a GET and then a callback for that, like, because it's open the whole time. So you just have to listen for, okay, I got data. What is it? You know, parse it out, right? And then what do I do for it? And then down here, I just say, you know, I just look to say, hey, if there is a message in the object that's coming in, then, you know, I just send it to everybody else. So again, with the wild character saying I'm going to everybody, not just the person that's connected right now, going to everybody. Okay, is there any questions on how that talks back and forth?
Yeah, there's a question that says, do you use plugins like NTK, ITK, 4D internet commands for any of this?
Yes, actually, so specifically for this, I do use the 4D internet commands. So I do have that put it next to the database on here for V15. When I put them up, I think when I put them up for download a little bit later, I'm going to probably have a separate V15, 16, 17, just so that, you know, you don't have to go find your own internet commands to bring over, so that they're ready to use right when you download them.
Cool. Another question. So I guess there's another approach that could be taken that's definitely got its shortcomings. That's the word. Where it's more of a polling from the web page, and polling. I'm assuming this all works just fine with iOS and Android apps just the same. So between WebSockets and a polling strategy, when would you not want to use WebSockets?
No, exactly. If you're polling, right, I guess it depends on the urgency of that poll. Mm-hmm. So if it is essentially you're just like, hey, I don't care to get a new email right now, just every hour check to see if I have new emails, I'll handle them, and then I'll mentally have that break for an hour before the next batch comes in, then it wouldn't be necessary, right? You could easily handle that with an AJAX call every hour on a timer to kind of bring that in. What the WebSocket does is there's no I guess spinning wheels. There's no, if I need data now, I send a request saying, hey, do you got data for me? And you say, no. Oh, okay. And then a couple seconds later, hey, do you have data for me? No. Disconnect, right? It's very heavy because you also have to understand too that on those AJAX calls, it has to negotiate as if it's a new connection every time. So right. When you say, hey, do you have data for me? The server has to look and say, hey, okay, what cookie does he have? Look at the session ID or look at the login, whatever came in, right? And then say, okay, check it against the database. Is it expired? No, not yet. Okay, he can continue. And then it says no, right. So it does like a whole bunch of stuff just to say that there's nothing new for you. So, one of the things I kind of say is WebSockets are not a replacement of AJAX calls. Okay, so they're not a replacement for get and post, but they could be depending on what you need. If you're, you've got, let's say you've got 2,000 users, just to throw that out there, and you only really need to give them data, every hour, like I said, every half hour maybe, then you probably would just do AJAX calls, because what's the point of leaving, 2,000 socket connections open if you're not utilizing, I guess, the benefit, from it. And another thing too is when it comes to mobile devices. So as you said, this works the same. Like WebSockets work on, I guess the Amazon Fire OS is now Android, so but it worked on the old the version 4 and down as well. iOS, Android, all the way from like version 4 of Android up, and it's like iOS 6 or 7, up, and essentially for mobile devices, if you turn off the device, Apple for iOS devices requires that you stop all connections. So even if I was looking at the app on my phone, as soon as I hit the power button, it has to close the connection, tells the server, hey, that person's closed, and then once they open it again, it's got to renegotiate to kind of bring that back. But that's the world we live in. For battery life, that's the expectation, is you don't want anybody kind of still connected to your phone or even listening or anything or any of that kind of stuff if it's in your pocket. But so I guess I would just say that WebSockets are more for, I need to send data now, as soon as I know it, as fast as I know it. And then I'm going to have a conversation with this website rather than just, hey, here's your styles, here's your images, here's what's new, here's what's trending, bye, right?
Cool.
And then, okay, so then that's how that works. Are there any other questions on this one?
Have you tested a limit of open sockets? Like how many can you have open?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. The first thing I will say that is the overhead is in the negotiation, but it's identical to an AJAX call where there's that kind of initial, hey, who are you, what's going on, and then make the connection. Once the WebSocket is connected, if you never send data back and forth, there's zero overhead of having that connection open. I like to describe it as like a shortcut. If you have a folder, deep in your hard drive that you're like, hey, I'm just going to make an alias or a shortcut on my desktop so that I can get there quicker. You make that shortcut, and yeah, there's a little bit of effort making it, fine. And now it exists just in memory in 4K, if that, right? That it's just there, and nothing happens to it. There's no overhead as long as you never touch it. As soon as you open it, then the computer's got to go and dig and say, hey, okay, where are you going? What's happening, right? There's a few things over there. So essentially, as far as having the connections open, I mean, well, I mean, everything's limitless if you get a bigger server, right? But for my purposes or for my tests, I've done on this actually chat demo about 300 that I tested that I felt comfortable in. I felt like, and I don't know if it was my computer that was kind of delaying a little bit, where I'd send a message and there might be a second before everybody got it. you know, or if it was the server that I was testing on. But I've tested 300, and it's been like it didn't break a sweat, is what I'm trying to say for that.
That's
and
great.
I'll be doing. Yeah, and I'll be doing more and more tests to just kind of see how, you know, like what is the limit? I want to see what a crash limit is. And I think I would need to use more computers because I feel like my client machine would get bogged down before the server machine does, if that makes sense.
And so it doesn't require a 4D process or a web process on the server. It's all handled just through standard web connection.
Well, actually, the way WebSockets are connected, at least to 4D, is a 4D process is a WebSocket. As in, if I have 8 WebSocket connections open, then there's 4D processes that are dedicated to those. Because like I said, once it negotiates, it just kind of keeps it there. And then the only way on the 4D side to keep track of the connection is to kind of like encapsulate it in its own process. And so if I were to, I'm going to right click on the screen here. If you can see this, that's kind of showing that there's a few processes here where all of these belong to one of these connections that are over there.
Gotcha.
The CPU usage is very low. Looking at the administrator window on the 4D server, it doesn't matter if there's 1 or 300. 4D reports about the same, you know, like 12%. You know, so I'm assuming it's on the 4D side. That they just kind of report that, hey, I'm checking in on this, but I think it can handle a lot more than that even,
cool.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, one process to one WebSocket is how it works from 4D.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna move forward to the next demo, and I'll open up the. So I'm quitting the server, so I'm disconnecting all you guys. We're closing that for the chat there. So the next demo is going to be the just a sortable syncing list that just kind of shows an example of how to store the data in 4D and then make sure that it's synchronized with everybody that's looking at it. So similar address you just went to where it was /chat. I'd like you to now go to /list. We'll go here, and then I'm just going to open it up. Oops, sorry, just a second. I got to open up the database actually. So we'll let this run. It's going to run the database on startup to launch the socket server. And so now you can see I got a few processes related to the socket server, and then there's a few processes that are ready to listen, ready for a connection. So for this database, I just have a simple table that just says sortable list, and it's probably exactly what you're thinking. I'm going to click on the table records where you're just looking at a list of items. This is demo item 1, demo item 2. So let's visit the website to take a look at what it does. So this is demos.the4dmd.com/list. And then what I'm going to do, because this one we're not keeping track of who's connected. It's probably harder to see how many connections are there. So I'm going to open up a few on my side so I can have 3 different connections to the server. So you can see how this kind of synchronous. So people are already using it. Good. I'm glad it's user friendly. So what you're looking at is as soon as I make the connection, the server says, hey, we got a new user, and it passes the current list from 4D into the browser. And then on the browser, you got a plus button to kind of say, yeah, exactly, take out the trash. I mean, this is sort of like a to-do list. I guess there's no checkboxes, but it's just to show that you can add stuff. And then right there, what you're seeing is all the refreshing is happening after it's been updated from 4D, and 4D let you know. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that when I'm hitting the plus button, I don't contemplate the meaning of life. I'm not just directly appending it to the DOM. I'm talking to 4D. 4D is then sending back, hey, I saved it. It's got a record ID. Here's the new list. And so what you can see right here is all these are staying synchronized as if they're 3 different machines. This works the same if you're on the 4G network or the LTE network of your phone, whether, it doesn't matter what the network is. Well, some people might have opinions on which network would be better for that, but essentially it'll keep everything synced. So I'm going to look at this hello world, and I'm just going to move it down and right behind eat lunch. And you can see here, as soon as I dropped it, it let the server know that something's changed, and then there's no list. It let the server know that something's changed, and then it let everybody know what the new changes is, like what it is. So El Buento, goes down, feed the fish goes up. But you can see how quickly it's going from, I guess from my my perspective, I'm staying on the local machine, so it's kind of deceiving to say, hey, look how fast it is on my machine on this webinar. But for the people that are connected, you should be seeing it exactly live as what you're seeing on the webinar. You know, so implement WebSockets can go down, and then it's instantly updated to these other two that had no idea what was going on in this first window over here.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show what this is doing and why, you know, and how you could use this guy. So I'm going to just hide Safari for a minute. We're going to go to the database, and I can, if I go to show all on the records here, we'll start seeing all the different ones. And so we're going to just look at the code behind this thing right here. Very simple. So we have the same 4 methods, right? These are your hook methods. These are the methods that you do as a developer to interact with my component to make this happen. So the first one is allow connection, and it's a very similar thing. I'm just saying, hey, if you get to the, and I guess I did call it a to-do list, but didn't put any checkboxes on it. But you know, if you get to the to-do list, I'm just going to allow you. So right now, this is just like an open test; anybody can get in. On connect, all I'm doing is like, hey, you're in, and then I'm going to broadcast the to-do list just to you. So I want to kind of show this right here. So this is the on connect method that shows who's connected. You know, whatever your name is. And then what I want to do is I'm going to open up this method, and I'm passing in your name as $1. So we're going to kind of just look at just a little bit of how this code works, right? So if you don't give me anything, so you can see the count parameters, if you don't give me anything, I'm just going to assume you mean we're going to send the to-do list to everybody that's connected right now, right? Otherwise, we're going to set the who to send to as just the person that just signed in. And you can see right here that all I'm doing is I'm just doing an all records on the sortable list. You know, this is that table that's over here. I'm doing an all records. I'm sorting by the order that's there. And then I'm just turning in, really doing selection to JSON, but turning it into an object that I can kind of organize it and then send it back. So I clean it up. This is my own kind of personal preference. I like having ID be capitals over here. But for JavaScript and everything that I do on the web, I like having a lowercase ID. So this little bit of code right here is just for appearances. Just right there, if you have any questions on that. And then I create a temporary object that I say, hey, the event is an updated list or update the list. And then I pass in the array, which is the records back. And then I send it back to whoever I'm supposed to send it to, whether it's everybody or just the person that signed in. So if we were to look back over here, so yeah, the list is already getting huge. And I want to look at the records because I just want to show this a little bit here. Is that as I change stuff in here, so let's look at demo item number 1 that has an order of 12, right? So if we move that up, and then we'll have to just refresh. You can see demo item 1 has an order number of 4. So this is just the design. This is not an application. This is just looking at your table in the design mode, and you can see the changes that are being made on the web over here, you know, live as they come in. On a side note, I added on the sortable list a trigger. And if you don't use triggers, you really should be using triggers that just kind of keeps track of, on the 4D side, if anything has been saved new, if anything has been saved existing, or even when something's been deleted. And so when something happens from 4D, so this is not from the web, right? When some, you know, a 4D client or somebody on 4D messes with that record, then what I do is it's really this part right here where I'm going to broadcast a list. And I say a delay because I'd like it to get out of this. I mean, the triggers are a validation, you know, method that runs on the server. And so essentially what I'm saying is that any change, I'm going to broadcast it back to the web. So if I were to go from 4D and change, you know, demo item 1 to say, you know, demo item, you know, 45, and then change it, you can see over here on the left, it already updated all the web clients to demo item 45. Way down here at the bottom is demo item 2. And so I can, you know, mess with that one, demo item again. And then as soon as there's a change, the trigger hits from the server, says, hey, there's something happened here. And then I send a broadcast to any of the clients that are open so that you can keep everything synchronized. So that whether you're looking on a computer that's on the first floor of your building or on the 5th floor, or, you know, or at home, it is what you see is what it is. Are there any questions on how this interacts or how this works? All right, everybody can hear me okay, right?
Yep. Yep. No, I think we're all just imagining what we can do with this.
Yes, and what this is this is a tool, exactly. Like this is just, I'm just showing you a few very simple, simple in concept. I just mean that a chat just made the most sense to kind of say, hey, data going back and forth, to just kind of show just the power of it. I use it in a number of different ways at work, and actually with a number of the clients that I have. The biggest things, like for me, is, you know, so I do write apps, and I've got, you know, Android apps and iOS apps. I used to play around with Palm Pilot, if anybody's ever had a Palm Pilot before, writing apps for that, and only a little bit in the Windows Phone. I kind of skipped that, and the market wasn't really there. But essentially, I wanted to make sure that any device, whatever device you had, whether it was a computer, whether it was a phone, you know, I wanted to make sure that I could synchronize data back and forth. So for like the app I have for work, for an employee portal, is as soon as somebody signs in, it negotiates who you are and says, hey, you know, okay, that password's right, great, here's your WebSocket. And then once they're connected, for any of the mobile devices, I can say, hey, if you're connected, I won't talk to Apple push notification. I won't talk to Google Firebase, which is the Android push notification service. You know, you're right there. So I'm just going to pass it. I'm going to push a message directly to you. I mean, you saw in the chat how from the server, I could just send like 100 messages just like that, or whatever, you know, whatever event happened. You can have a stored procedure or something on the 4D server that's running, checking something. And then as soon as it goes offline, then you can let somebody know. And then if they turn off their phone and if they turn off their phone and the WebSocket closes, then on the server side, I say, okay, I need to send them a message. Are they here? No, they're not. Okay, I'm going to talk to Apple push notification and send them a notification. Or if they have an Android device, I would talk to Google Firebase. And so, I mean, that's just an example of what, you know, some of the things that you can use to this sort of I don't know if replace is really the word, because I'm not exactly creating a messaging service, but it's because this is a communication tool. You can say, hey, if I already have a WebSocket, like, yeah, why would I do a GET request or a POST recall, right? If I'm already doing the WebSocket, I can just do everything off of that. If you know, I don't need to talk to a third-party service or something to push data to somebody.
Well, yeah, in the Firebase would be more like iOS notifications or Android notifications, but this is more if you wanted to have a live chat or a live update once you're inside of an app or a website. Yep. Yeah.
Well, and like you said about the polling, right? You know, what if your web application had something doing related to like restarting a server, or hey, can you turn on this server over here? And when you do that, I mean, from the web client perspective, so from Safari, Chrome, Firefox, whatever you use, yes, even IE, we hope not, but even IE, you don't have to constantly be polling, saying, okay, I'm going to check back in a minute, and then after a minute, I'm going to check back every second until it's up. You literally can just wait, and then as soon as the server knows, hey, you know, that process or whatever you wanted to launch is launched, you can get notified right away.
That's awesome.
You know, and change stuff right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other. So the last demo, I'm just going to get to. I'm going to close out of this, and we're going to close the. So it's closing the WebSocket connections. You can see there was kind of a progress bar showing that when I quit the database, you know, I'm stopping the WebSocket connections. The last one is a very simple one. It's not a demo that is. This is going to be very simple, where I can just show it right here. This is not a demo with the URL. So if you're looking for the URL, going, hey, wait, I didn't get the URL for that one. It's because there's not one for this one. All I was showing on this is similar to how you saw on the to-do list. So once this comes up right here, similarly to what you saw on the to-do list, where 4D was aware of the changes and it was updating records on the side. This right here is I've got a few inner process variables as an example, saying, hey, WebSocket names and what IP they're connected with. So if I were to, just as an example, I'm going to connect to this from my phone because I can. And then when I connect to it here on my phone, it says connected. And then on this side here, you can see that it got a name. I know I didn't really explain this, but these names don't mean much if you want them to. By default, they're just going to increment and they'll reuse each other. So it will turn over. They'll never get to 1 million or whatever. They'll just increment just to be unique. And then you have a method to rename this as you see fit. So once somebody logs in that, you know, that's Bob Smith, then, you know what I mean, you can rename the connection to Bob Smith, so you don't have to figure out what connection Bob Smith is. You can literally say, why don't you send text to, sorry, this is another piece of code over here. You could send text directly to WebSocket/monitor/ you know, Bob Smith. And then that way you don't have to go find him. You know, we already know who he is. This right here, what this is doing, so I'm going to look at the project methods here, is this is just a form with inter-process arrays. And then when the connection comes in, I just say, hey, update the connection name. Sorry, I'm showing that right there. On disconnect, same thing. On data, I'm doing nothing. Like this thing right here is it's just a shell, because we're not communicating back and forth. But as connections come in, it's showing that on this side, you know, hey, we're connected. Right here, you can hear status connecting. And then you can see it shows up over there. So I'm going to open up a new tab or a new window here so you can see it. So there's another connection, right? So you can see here, and it says status connected. If I were to close, you can see how fast 4D knows about it. Like as soon as the browser closes, 4D's like, whoa, that socket's not there, you know, and then it updates. So this is a 4D form, you know, you're seeing. Or the opposite. So if I were to close, you know, 4D, right? And then over here, it is instant. I've already, you know, the website already knows, hey, the 4D server went down. So maybe right here, instead of saying disconnected, you might say, hey, offline, you can continue working, but once we come back online, it will, you know, I mean, it'll start syncing or whatever you'd like it to do there. And so that is, those are the 3 demos that I wanted to kind of show a little bit of the power and kind of the use cases of the mdWebSocket component. Are there any questions on this part of it? And can everybody still hear me? Yeah, I'm starting to see some of the questions there, Brent, that, you know, hey, what's the cost and is it going to be open source? So number one is it's not going to be open source. I'm going to pull up this, I'm going to pull up the keynote again right here. And it is, sorry here. So after this presentation, I'm going to get it up on the website so you can download it and start using it, and messing around with it, figuring out what you can use it for, what, you know, how well it works or doesn't work. I want to hear about all the kind of feedback. Right now, it's going to be kind of an open beta. And then, and I know everybody kind of hates seeing this, but the price for the full unlock thing is going to be to be determined. And I'm going to leave it at that for this presentation. But the WebSocket component and the three demos that I showed off today will be ready to download a little bit, you know, probably about an hour from now after this webinar. Are there any questions about that? And actually, okay, so that just brings me to the last part of it. That's it for the presentation. And so, does anybody have any questions just about the whole thing? Okay, so with that, I'm just going to turn this back to you, Brent.
Yeah.
I put my email there, so if anybody wants to reach out, I'm actually going to flip this one more slide. Just to, so I'm Matt Davis. So the 4D Matt Davis is kind of the 4DMD.com. Right now it's something that, like I said, I'm branching out. So I'm trying to kind of build this up. I'm starting with the WebSocket component. And so today is going to be, I'll get stuff up and I'll get, so people can be testing and trying. And I'm really excited about this. And so if anybody has any emails, comments, suggestions, any of that kind of stuff, I am open, for that.
I'm excited for it too, Matt. And I just would say you must be making your father very proud.
Well, yeah, it's yeah, yeah. He loves that I'm in 4D because then he says that he benefits, right? He goes, he gets a copy of everything that I create.
Oh, sure, yeah. No, I can't wait to play with this. And I as often happens, I have an immediate use for this kind of a thing, and I'll be excited to see how it fits into our solution. So
great.
Okay, well, thanks so much for the demo. I mean, it's fantastic. It really is. Everybody can check out the demo and the code, the slides from the 4DMethod website there. I'm gonna click back over here.
Yeah, sounds good. And then I was gonna switch back. Perfect.
Yeah. Again, that was Matt Davis showing us his component for WebSockets. And check it out. I think we covered all the questions so far. Yep, nothing else out there currently, but he can be reached through his email on the slides. For our schedule, you can check out upcoming meetings, the schedule for upcoming meetings. Right, Matt at the 4DMD.com. But yeah, check out our schedule at 4dmethod.com/schedule. We have meetings coming up on May the 8th and July the 3rd. We don't have a dedicated presenter or a special topic presenter for either of those meetings. So there's a great opportunity for somebody, for a couple of people, namely, or for even more. Kirk and I were talking some time back, and he suggested perhaps we should have a roundtable discussion for independent developers. If that interests you and you'd like to take part, please reach out. Also be happy to play some pre-recorded project talks and to have a discussion about those, or perhaps talk about future 4D, the future of 4D. What's where's the 4D growth and development going to be 5-10 years from now? If you have any other ideas, please reach out and we'll get you on the calendar. Any other questions can be posted to 4dmethod@gmail.com. Feedback is always appreciated, and so is your support beyond just taking part in the user group. Check us out at patreon.com/4dmethod. So we really appreciate it. So thanks so much, everybody. I know we ran a little bit long today, but I think we had some terrific content. Thank
Definitely.
you, Matt, again. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Matt.
No problem. Thanks, Brent.
Yeah.
See you all at the World Tour.
Yeah, we'll see you at the World Tour. See you at the next 4D Method meeting.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right.